It was only a few weeks ago we were able to have a go in BMW's X6M Competition, thanks to the generosity of our friends at International BMW. And today, we've got the coupified twin, the X6M Competition. So let's see if there's anything between these super SUVs. I'll be totally honest with you guys, this one kind of perplexes me because on one hand we have something from BMW's M division, which means it's intended to be a sports car, something sharp and dynamic, and on the other hand it's an SUV, which means it's tall, it's heavy, and the center of gravity is up higher, which compromises some of the sports car thing. And then, again in tandem with that, it's an SUV, but they've chopped a bunch of headroom out of the back and a bunch of trunk space out of the back, so I guess I don't really know what it's trying to be, but identity crisis aside, let's talk about what this thing is like behind the wheel. Thundering away under the hood is the beating heart of a 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8, and we're familiar with this S63 from our time in the X5M, M5, M8, and a few others. And in competition spec, it's dialed up to make a whopping 617 horsepower and 553 pound-feet. That horsepower figure is way up over the base X6M. But the torque number actually stays the same, but don't you for one second think that this thing just lumbers off the line. This thing is quick, 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, and that's a quick reminder that this is a family mid-sized SUV, something that's capable of going on a Costco run, and if it does go on the Costco run, it's going to show that Costco the quickest run it's ever seen. Power is great for grabbing headlines and selling cars, but the M division over at BMW have always taken themselves a little more seriously than chucking up big power figures and not fussing over the rest. Leave that to SRT. No, the letter M on the back, and especially with competition underneath, rest assured this is not a one-trick pony. So there's a high level of expectation that this thing is carrying around, and as we start to put it through some more aggressive corners, we'll start to kind of see the conflicting ideologies of a super SUV coupe and if that really works in practice. But here's the thing, I don't know how they did it, but they've pulled it off. The brakes are huge and strong, the steering is super accurate and it has a nice sense of heft to it, and then the mid-corner grip from these Pirelli P0 tires is really impressive. And then the damping, of course, it's variable because you have an adaptive damper set, so it's kind of reading the roads to give you exactly what you need, and it's all made possible by the fact that you have this super rigid, super balanced chassis underneath where the suspension can bolt to and do its job really, really well. And then as you come out of corner exit, or come out of mid-corner into corner exit, you start to roll on the power, you get this just wave of torque and horsepower from the 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8, and it sounds incredible. And then you go to shift, and you have independent programmable shift logic from your ZF 8-speed box, and it is just quick, it is lethal, it's a clinic on driving dynamics, just in a weird shell. And that brings up the two things that I'm constantly reminded of behind the wheel, and that's height and weight. From a powertrain perspective, this X6M, along with basically the entire lineup from BMW, is faultless. The engines are potent, the ZF gearboxes have amazing shift logic, and their differential tuning doesn't waste an ounce of power. However, no amount of shift tuning or spring rate adjustment will make me unaware of how high I'm sitting and how the over 5,000 pounds of weight feels on braking and in a corner. It's not to say it's detrimental to the dynamics, but if you were expecting the X6M to handle and rotate like an M5, well, you shouldn't expect car manufacturers to defy physics. That said, I didn't go into this thinking, oh yeah, this SUV is going to drive like a sedan. No, that would be insane. What I did think was, this thing is going to be a riot behind the wheel, and it is. But in the interest of being thorough, let's dial things back into comfort, slow things down, and see how this X6M gets on doing the utility part of SUV. Just cruising in this thing, I would call fine. You could probably drive coast to coast in this thing and do a nice long road trip, but you'd probably arrive to the opposite coast without a license, because while this is the X6M Competition and it can settle down, it doesn't really give you the sense that it wants to settle down. It's just kind of always nudging you with a little bit of a firm, over-damped ride and so much power at your disposal. It's just kind of always nudging you saying, Yeah, let's pin it. So behind the wheel, this X6M Competition is insanely quick. It handles better than a lot of mid-tier sports cars, and with the comps all getting M Sport exhaust, it makes all the right noises. And it can do the daily thing, but you can tell its heart, it wants to be driven. So with that, let's step outside. Okay, so unsurprisingly, this X6M Competition shares a lot of the same personality traits as the X5M Competition that we drove a few weeks ago, with some subtle differences in nuance, but it's largely the same. And that actually kind of translates to the exterior design, at least in terms of if you look at it directly from the front. The face and the front fascia is largely the same as you would get in the X5, and that's a good thing because I think it's an attractive, aggressive-looking M SUV. In here you have the black sapphire metallic paint, you've got the special M anniversary roundel, which looks fantastic, and of course all competition M cars get the shadow line or the black accents all over, so this is properly murdered out, but you do get some nice iridescent metal flake in the paint. Your lower fascia, it's a lot of grille, it's a lot of gill, you've got your radar detector up here, but even past the grille, you can see some of the structural rigidity that they've built into the chassis, and that's one of the things that BMW does really well. They take good care of their chassis, which lets the suspension do what it needs to do, and that's why the cars are so dynamic. But then as we wrap around the side, we look at the headlights, and it's BMW's laser lights, which are fantastic. They're super bright, super crisp. And then the profile, we start to talk about these wheels as we usually do. You've got body-colored wheel arches, which is nice. It's a nice gloss finish. Even though it's an SUV, it doesn't need it to be like the cheap, scratchy, ruggedized plastic. You do get a little gill extractor back behind the wheel, but you have a 21-inch multi-spoke wheel. This is specific to the competition trim, and it's kind of a two-tone gunmetal with the black. You've got your red M caliper back there and your anniversary roundel. This, interestingly, on the 6 is wrapped in a Pirelli P0 tire, whereas the X5M that we drove the other week was a Michelin PS4S tire. So as we talked about behind the wheel, there's a little difference between the two, but it's not going to be something that's going to stand out to you a lot. But something that will stand out to you a lot is the shape. And this is where, personally, I prefer the X5M. You have a more traditional SUV hatch style shape, so that translates to more headroom in the back and a bigger trunk. To me, it's just not my cup of tea, but you know, a lot of people like it, so you know, take that as you will. Around the back though, we've got this tapering roof with this kind of like dual backwards cap style wing, which then comes down the rear glass and then into a nice subtle lip spoiler on your back. Really subtle taillights. There's not a whole lot of surface area like there was in the X5, but you've got really crisp LEDs back here, completely blacked out badging, and then your anniversary roundel as well. And then you've got a lot of vertical surface before you get down to your gloss black diffuser and your quad tips, which sound fantastic. But let's step inside. Okay, and then on the interior, it's a pretty common BMW spec, at least from what I've seen. It's black on black on black on black on black. But I think it looks really good, especially as we were shooting rollers with this thing, you know, with the murdered out look from the outside, the black interior, up against some darker clouds, like it has a really cool presence. On the interior though, it looks expensive. It doesn't quite have as much character as that X5M that we drove, just because it doesn't have the secure orange interior, but the leather itself is really, really nice. The stitching is really nice. There's aluminum, there's carbon fiber. The center console doesn't creak and rattle. It's built really, really well on the interior here. And of course, the light up badging on the seats really gets me every single time. But then speaking of seats, you do have heated seats, you have cooled seats, you have massage seats, you have a heated steering wheel. You also have a customizable head-up display, which is great. Your digital cluster is fantastic. It changes with your drive modes a little bit. You do have iDrive 7, so it's not quite the same as we tested in the iX and the i4. That's the new gen iDrive 8, but it's totally usable. It's still very nice. It's still probably one of the best between Mercedes and Audi, even being the later generation system. This will transition in the coming years to the new iDrive 8, but the graphics are good, the processing is fast, and you do get loads of features. You get your reverse assist and your breadcrumbs, you get your crazy 360 camera with the augmented reality, you get park assist, traffic jam assist. Behind the wheel, the driver assist system is actually like really, really good. It's probably top 3 or top 5 for sure. It does use the camera in the gauge cluster to kind of watch your eyes, so make sure you're paying attention to the road, which, you know, we shouldn't have to say this, but we do just to cover our ass. No car drives itself, so pay attention when you're behind the wheel. But if anything were to happen, you do have a built-in drive recorder, which is really, really nice, so you can play with that in your settings. I did forget to mention that the steering wheel comes with its own custom, M1 and 2 buttons, so you can have kind of like a really aggressive setting and kind of a more calm setting, and then you can kind of program your shortcuts, which is really nice. You do have sunshades in the back, you have ambient lighting, you have a pretty big panoramic roof, and that takes us to the rear seats, which is where I start to have a little bit of trouble. In terms of legroom, they're decent. I have enough room. In the X4, I would be a little bit more cramped, but then in terms of headroom is really the thing, and that's what you get with the coupified kind of tailored, or excuse me, not tailored, but like sloping roof line. So that eats into your headroom a little bit, but you do have heated seats back there. You do have your own climate controls and all sorts of stuff. So it is pretty nice if you're not suffering for headroom. And then, the trunk, just like the rear seats with the roof line, it's going to be a more compromised cargo area as compared to the X5 just because of the roof line. So, take that with, a grain of salt. If you want the look of this thing with the tapered roof, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get less headroom and less trunk space, but you get the look if that's what you're into. So it's still decent size. It's still totally usable. And it's still practical, but it is less so than it would be in the X5. And I think that's probably a good time to get into some final thoughts. So the BMW X6M Competition. It's a statement as it rips down the road. It's insanely quick, the noise it makes is incredible, and the interior treatments are spectacular. However, I can't help but make the comparison to the X5. And for me, that's the one you'd find in my garage. It's all the flash of the X6, but with better rear headroom, more trunk space, and it's cheaper. Either way you go though, BMW continues to blur the lines of sport and super SUV. Thanks again to International BMW for letting us have a go, and we'll see you in the next one.